Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Gittin, Perek Tes, Chapter 9, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah 5. Today's Mishnah is sponsored by the Garland children, L'Zeich Nishmas, in memory of their uncle, Gavriel ben Moshe Nachum, the Neshama Shav and Aliyah.
Amen.
Okay, Shnayim Shashalchu, Shnei Gittin Shavin. Two people sent two identical Gittin, meaning they have a Shliach, and they sent a Shliach to bring a get. We're going back to that. We haven't discussed that in a long time. The two people have sent with one shliach a get. They're in one place, their wives in another place, and they're sending it to their wives, and their names and their wives' names are exactly the same. Now we know that a get has to be written lishma for the purpose for the woman who's being divorced, for the people being divorced. So it's really up to the shliach to make sure that he knows, whose is which. But what happened was Vinis Arvu, and they got mixed up. He doesn't know whose is which. So what do? Says the Mishnah, Nice name, Shneim Lazu. It's not that difficult. Give both to each one. You hand both to each one, right? Whichever one is their get they have gotten, and they're divorced. So, there's a solution to the problem. Lefikach, therefore, if this is what we're saying, Avad Echad Mehen, forget about one of them got mixed. After they got mixed up, the guys, not only did he mix up the Gittin, he lost one of them. Okay? Hare Hasheni Batal. The second one is useless. Because what are you going to do with it? At the end of the day, we don't know whose get it is. So therefore, you can't use it for a divorce. Now, what's interesting is, though, or problematic almost, is that if he does give the get to one of them, she's suffik megareshes. She's maybe megareshes, because she's maybe divorced, because maybe this was her get. Practically speaking, she can't get remarried. But if then her husband dies, she can't marry a Kohen because maybe she was divorced already beforehand. So the point of the Mishnah is, if you give each one gets both get, that means they for sure got the one that was for them, and that would work for them to be divorced. But once one gets lost, they're not going to be able to use the remainder because we don't know which one it was. We don't know whose get this was, who this get was written for. Now, next halacha, unrelated. Chamisha shekasvu klal b'seicha get. 5 men. Okay, here's the story. 5 men decided to divorce their wives, and they wrote their gittin for their wives on one paper. One document. Let's listen to the case. Don't whatever. Just this is the case. Okay. These 5 men went ahead and they wrote the gittin. Each one wrote the get for the wife on the same paper, so the same document. Okay, but here's the story. But this is where the differences come about. Chamisha shekasvu klal b'seicha get. What they did is they wrote a general heading for the get, which means at the top of the get they wrote the date once. Right on the top of the get, it's written a date on top, and then the rest of the get it has written in it ish pleni migaresh plenis. So and so divorces his wife, and we have to add, and he says to her, Harei muteres l'chaladim. You're permitted to every man. You got to have the basic wording of a get, and then it says upleni plenis, and so divorced his wife. Okay, you got 5 of these guys writing this. Okay, but you got a date on the top. You have 5 guys writing, or 4 or 5 guys written in the get, right? So and so is divorcing his wife, and he says you're permissible to every man. You've got the main part of the get of each one in there. V'edim ilamata, and the edim signed on the bottom. The edim signed on the bottom. Says the Mishnah, kulan ksherin. They're all kosher. V'inase, they're all usable. And each one gets it. You pass it around. No, you pass it around. You gotta, one guy's got to give it, and then the other guy's got to give it, and the other guy's got to give it. There has to be a separate giving. You can't give it to one woman and she passes it to another one. That's not going to work. You have to have the giving of the get. But the point is, this one document works for divorce for all 5. Because again, it's important to know because the point is, you see it all as one document. You've got a date on the top. You've got the witnesses on the bottom, and it just says this one divorced this one divorced that one. So Everything, so it's all one kosher document that could be used for all these different people because it's written for all these different people, and that's what's written in the get. Okay? Now, however, let's say the case is a little bit different. And that is that you've got the typhus, you've got the text of a get for each one. So the Bartenura explains it means like this. Zaman l'chalachas va'achas. Each one got its own time. B'kach b'Shabbos kirish pleni l'plenis v'ishlam aget. B'kach b'Shabbos kirish pleni l'plenis v'ishlam aget. I'm just reading the Bartenura. That means you've got, let's say, Beis Nisan, whatever year, right? And then you get a whole get, right? It has a whole text of a get there, okay? And then he goes ahead and he writes again. You've got a date, right? So-and-so divorced his wife, and the text of a get. And then you have the Edom on the bottom. You got that? So here we have a case.
Is it the same Edom?
There's one, no. Well, 1 second. There's only one pair of Edom written on the bottom. Only one. If each one had its own text.
A different on the same page.
It's all on the same page, and you have a separate text, including the date, written for each one. Right? So it says, I'm just reading here on in the English. On Sunday, the first of Nisan, so-and-so divorces his wife, etc. Right? It's a whole get, right? And then again, it says the whole thing again. It's the same date for each one, but you have a separate date and text written for each one. And then you have, so again, there was a text written for each one, meaning each one had a full get text written for each one, which means each one has the date, each one has the text. And the Edom, there's only one set of Edom signing on the bottom. The get that the Edom are read with is kosher. That means to say the only get that's kosher is the bottom get, the bottom one. Because the witnesses, you can't see the witnesses as testifying for all of them, because you have because each one has a whole get. It's just on one piece of paper, but each one has a whole get, and the witnesses are only under the final one. In that situation, you cannot go ahead and say that we see the witnesses as signing for all of them. If you just have one date, and then you just have basic text, this one does this one, this one does this one, this one, and then you have the witnesses on the bottom. Okay, so we see the witnesses going on all of them. But once you already have a full text for each one, then we don't see the witnesses going on all of them. We only see going on the last one. So here, because the date is written separately for each one, it is clear that each get is a separate document. They may be on one piece of paper, but each one's a separate document. Therefore, the witnesses might have meant to testify only about the last get, the one under which they signed their names, but not the others. Because don't forget, you have a full text of a get for each one, but there's only witnesses on the bottom of one. So we don't know which are the witnesses signing to all of them, or only to the one that they're right under, like you would have in a regular get. And therefore, because we do not know, the 4 earlier gittin cannot be used. Now, here on the bottom, they point out that this depends on the machlekes that we had in a previous Mishnah. Okay, because let's say you have this document, right? You only have the witnesses on the bottom, but you each guy gave this document to his wife in front of witnesses. So we said before, according to Rabbi Elazar, a Masira Karsi. The witnesses that make the get work are those who see it being an over, not the ones who sign it. So therefore, if you go ahead and you have this document, right? It's basically a document, it's basically a get without witnesses, but given in front of witnesses. Rabbi Elazar says that's kosher, that's fine. Our Mishnah that says you can't use the get, which because you only have witnesses on the bottom, is because this Mishnah is following Rabbi Meir, who holds Eidei Chasima Karsi. It's the witnesses who sign, who make the get into a get. And therefore, in this case, we don't know who the only ones we know for sure the witnesses are signing on is to the one on the bottom, but not to the others. And therefore, the only one that this get is going to be usable for is the one that the witnesses are right under that one. Have a wonderful day. Shavua Tov, Ketavach.
Why don't they take the piece of paper and rip it and give